Hi, guys. We'll get started in just one moment. While you are waiting, use that QR code. We'll also drop the link in the chat to sign up for Leland. It's how you will get access to the recording of this event and the others of MBA Week, how you'll get access to future events just like this and a whole lot more free resources. Use that QR code. We'll also drop it in the chat. We'll get started in just 1 minute. Okay, we've still got some people trickling in, but let's get started. We've got a lot of ground to cover today. Super excited for this. Essays are one of the most daunting. They're one of the most complicated parts of the MBA application process, but we are here to help. So let's get started. This is the third event of MBA Week. We still have a ton of information value to cover. We send out comms every day, but you can also we'll send up some follow-ups here and in the chat. Make sure to sign up for all of the events that you're interested in order to get the calendar hold and the recording and everything afterwards. Again, we'll send that schedule in the chat. Welcome to MBA Week. We're so happy to have you here. These are the most fun things to put on. Our agenda for today, we'll tell you a little bit about who we are, what we do, introduce you to our amazing panelists, and then we'll get started with our panel. We've got a lot of questions lined up for you today. And some other fun things to cover. Just so you know who's who, my name is Amelia. I run all content SEO at Leland. Tons of MBA content here to help you find the best resources and help you navigate all of the information that's out there. You will also see Erica in the chat, as well as Amanda, Josh, and John. We're all here to help you get into the school of your dreams. Most importantly, though, excited to introduce you to your panelists today. Panelists, I'm going to have you introduce yourselves. We've got Dion, Jerry, and Allie. Dion, if you want to start, and then we can go in order.
Sure. Thank you. I'm a full-time professional MBA coach. I'm not sure I knew that I would end up this way, but I found my calling following a career doing everything from international business to marketing, communications, chief of staff roles, mostly in tech, but in other organizations too. And why do I do this? I was a first-gen college student. I attended Stanford as an undergrad, double majoring in economics and communications with concentrations in sociology and journalism, and then returned to Stanford GSB for my MBA. Honestly, I didn't know what I didn't know when I was applying. It worked out, but now I'm excited to pay it forward to give people more confidence and more certainty for what they can do to submit their strongest essays.
All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Jerry. Thank you so much for being here. I am also a full-time professional coach now. I spent many, many years, most of my career at Harvard Business School, and 8 of those years I was in the MBA admissions office. And, as part of the board there, I was lucky enough to get to meet hundreds of applicants and interview hundreds of applicants, or thousands maybe. And so now I love to kind of take that experience that I had there and sort of experience across the board with the top business schools and really help people sort of identify what makes them special. Sometimes people think, oh, I don't have a thing, I don't have a story. And part of the job that I absolutely love is like helping people uncover that, to discover it. Everyone is interesting and unique in their own ways. So that's part of the most fun part of my job. And sort of similar to what Dion said, I also like to help make sure that people kind of, I can reduce anxiety. I can make this as painless as possible, even though it's a lot of time and effort. If you have somebody with you along the way, then it makes it that much better. So, that's kind of the role that I try and fill. And yeah, so it's good to see all of you here. Thank you so much. And look forward to helping out today on the panel.
Awesome. And I'll round us out. My name's Allie. I'm very excited to be here with you all and with Jerry and Dion, and many thanks to the Leland team for putting on such phenomenal events. You should also check out their boot camp, which I know they will be showcasing a little later. I am a 2021 grad from Wharton, 2022 grad from the Kennedy School at Harvard, where I did a dual degree with the public policy school and also enrolled in a bunch of HBS classes as well. My career has spanned financial services. I currently work in real estate private equity. I'm a recovering investment banker, recovering management consultant, so have a lot of the lived experience that I think a lot of the folks on this call have as well. Been doing MBA coaching now for 5 years. I do work full-time in real estate private equity and work with select clients for the admissions process because I love storytelling and I love utilizing the experience I had in business school to help people identify what I believe, as Jerry does, are their true superpowers and how they can be most resonant in an application process. I go through what I call like business school therapy with a lot of the clients that I work with, really digging in to try to understand what your personal narrative is and how we can differentiate you to AdComs. So really excited to be here and to jump in.
Thanks, coaches. We have an absolutely stacked panel, as you can tell. These are incredible coaches, excited for all of us to learn from them. You know who we are. We would love to get to know you a little bit. This is already getting started. Someone is tuning in from Mumbai, very far. Tell us, where are you dialing in from, and what is something you're excited to learn about today, or what's something that you would like to learn about today? Go ahead and answer in the chat. Let's see where everyone is coming from. Mongolia. Wow, that might be the furthest that we get. Delhi, New York, Chicago, okay. Turkmenistan, Tampa. Wow, we have got quite the squad today from all over. Keep them coming. We love seeing where you're from. Thanks for joining us. I know it's not the most convenient time for all of you to be here. Keep them coming while you're doing that. If this is your first Leland event, just to tell you a little bit about what we do. Our goal is to help you reach your dreams, whether that's getting into business school, whether it's getting a competitive job in an industry, whether it's taking a test. We have one-on-one specialized coaching with coaches just like this panel. Absolutely incredible people with so much experience to draw from. We also host a ton of events like this. Make sure you're signed up again so you get access to them and get invited to future ones. We also have Leland Plus, which is kind of an MBA content library. It's self-paced and it has 100+ sample MBA applications, letters of recommendation, essays, videos from coaches just like this. And it's a little bit more of that like kind of self-paced course. So whatever you need, wherever you're at in your stage of the application, whether you're just getting ready to take the test or you're applying for round 1 this year, we've got something to help you. And this is why we do what we do. We've helped tens of thousands of people reach these goals, and we would love to help you too. The top universities, the top firms. This is what makes us. Seeing you guys win is what makes this job worth it for us. And so thanks for being here. Thanks for being part of the community. We'll talk about this a little bit later, but as Ali mentioned, we just announced this week only our MBA application bootcamp. It's 8 courses, an hour each with prep work and homework and so much content from these coaches. It's all coach led, and it will take you through kind of every single part of the application. It works with like a cohort course. So you have someone kind of leading you along, and it's the best way to get started on the application. And then you can layer it in with coaching and Leland Plus and some of these other things. We'll go into a little bit later. But to get into what you're really here for, let's start talking about the MBA application essays. We're going to start with just some context setting. What role do the essays play in the context of the application? If you were at the first session yesterday, you heard there's a lot. There's resumes and letters of recommendation and your GPA and GMAT. Jerry, why don't you answer this one? How do essays kind of play into these different application components?
Yeah, sure. So, how I think about it is like the role of the essays is really sort of what brings your candidacy to life, to make you more than a list of accomplishments or credentials or a resume, right? It really shows who you are as a person. Those are things you can't really find anywhere else on the application. So, they've been a part of the process application, the essays have been a part of this application process forever, for years and years. So, that AdCom reads them, they care about them, they are important. And I think, like I said, they build you into like a human, right? Like versus just a list of things or accomplishments. So, it shows sort of ideally, if they're done really well, then they're coming through with, your values, your passions, your worries, your goals. It makes you into like a real person and that person can't be replicated, right? Nobody else is going to be having that same story or that same, have the same answers to those questions. So so I think it's an important part of like really building that narrative to who you are.
Yeah, I love that. I've heard it explained that like everything else is just kind of papers, and then your essays is how you talk to the AdCom. It's the only part where you're like directly addressing the admissions committee. So they're super powerful, super important, and to kind of double up on that. So what are the key components of what makes a standout MBA application? What like differentiates a really good one from a mediocre one? Ali, do you have any thoughts here?
Sure. I think it's really defining what that anecdote and what that personal story is that's going to capture the minds of the admissions committee and, like Jerry's indicating, make you human to them. I think what differentiates good and great MBA applications is really the ability to fluidly connect that personal passion and what animates you and how that's informed the decisions you've made as it relates to your academic studies, your extracurricular activities, your volunteer time, like all of these things that we stack together. But then ultimately an MBA is a professional degree, right? So how does that connect to your storyline and what you're going to go back to business school for? So again, it's really that anecdote that I think working with a coach really helps you pinpoint, and everyone on this panel has so much experience doing that and tailoring each individual story to make it stand out to an outcome.
Yeah, we've seen plenty of like pre-coaching essays and post-coaching essays, and they are not the same. Dion, anything to add here on what makes a really, really good MBA essay?
I would just like to emphasize the human aspect, the storytelling aspect. I have been in the position where I've read hundreds of essays and looked at many resumes. And this is your opportunity as an applicant to be, as Jerry said, more than your resume, to really let the admissions people know what are your values, how you think, why you've done what you do, what gives you energy, what keeps you up at night. And it should ideally, form a picture in the admissions person mind of who you really are. What would it be like to go to school with you? What are you going to contribute? In terms of, let's say, the more the mechanics of writing an essay, I have what I think of as my 5 C's. The hallmarks of a strong essay is that it would be clear. It would be concise. You cannot, it's not unlimited word count. You will present like a compelling picture of who you are and why you need to do what you need to achieve in life and how you'll contribute. It must be credible. I have to emphasize that. If I read a beautiful essay or the AdCom reads a beautiful essay and it's not quite believable, they are not going to have a chance to call you up and ask you about it. They will have to make a decision. And then lastly, it must be cohesive. It's only one component of your application, but it's a very important component. And so what you bring to your essay should not be redundant. You need to make the best use of that canvas. And, definitely it should not be contradictory. You should provide merely complementary, supplemental information about the real you.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah,
Oh,
I was just
ahead,
gonna say, no, sorry, I was just gonna add that, like, the standout essays too, I think, in addition to absolutely all those things that, that Dion and Ali said, I think, the ones that really are standout are the ones that sort of are, they are personal, they often are vulnerable, and they're super genuine, right? So they could not have been written by someone else. If you're looking at your essay and you're saying, gosh, really, I could plug someone else's name in here, then it hasn't quite hit the mark yet, right? So you really want it to convey a sense of like who you are as a person, what makes you particularly tick, what drives you. And, one tactical way to kind of assess this too, if you, whether you have a coach or not, is to, check in with a friend or two and say, hey, does this sound like me? Do you get the sense for who I am? Me, is that coming through here? Because sometimes it's hard to tell yourself, you. And so it's hard to, to see that. So bringing some other folks in to kind of get their, their take on it can be helpful too.
I love that. And this dovetails perfectly into our next question. Also, I sent Dion's 5 C's in the chat if you missed them. Clear, concise, compelling, credible, and cohesive. All important to remember. Okay, so love Jerry's point. You have to get vulnerable. It needs to be unique to you. If you can plug someone else's name into that application essay, it is not deep enough. I love that. So how do you start with this? Well, you got to dig deep and do some self-reflection. So how do you help your clients start with this? It's kind of it's a daunting task, Stanford's is what matters most and why. Where do you even start with answering that question? Ali, where do you start with helping clients figure out this kind of self-reflection piece?
Yeah, it's a really great question. And like you mentioned, incredibly daunting. I think there are a couple of different exercises that I work with clients to do. The first is honestly just categorizing and going through a comprehensive intake of what your major life experiences have been. I'm talking from like your first memory all the way up through your like last review in your professional setting. And so it's like, what can you essentially brain dump on 5 pages, free flow form of consciousness, and then we work through that together to try to understand and recognize and identify patterns. The second thing that I often do with clients is to ask them what their values are and what really motivates them. I ask them to, in the way that Jerry was talking about consulting with people who know you best, you will also ask that question to your best friend, your family, your significant other. And again, you start to develop that pattern recognition. And then I also work through conversations where I ask my clients, what has scared them the most? When have you been the most scared in your entire life? When have you been the most vulnerable in your entire life? When have you been the most proud of yourself in your entire life? And again, we work through to identify themes that can come together to form that cohesive story. I think there are a lot of powerful self-reflection exercises you can do on your own time. A lot of it also is just write, just put pen to paper. ChatGPT is a wonderful augmentation, I think, that everyone can start to utilize if you have to help thinking through like just how to initially get words out. But it's really working with a coach that I think can help you streamline and tailor what's good, bad, and great, and then can be utilized in a comprehensive package.
I love that. We do have some self-reflection questionnaires. If you would like help getting started in Leland Plus, you can check out. We've got 5 of them from coaches. Jerry, anything to add here on how to start with the self-reflection piece?
Yeah, I mean, that was absolutely perfect. I would, everything Ellie said, that's kind of right on, and I think each coach approaches it in some sort of related way, right? The questions themselves may be slightly different, or the exercise itself may be slightly different, but essentially you're all, they're all getting to the same thing. At the end of the day, what we help you look for is what are the themes, what are the commonalities, what's the thread, and that's sometimes hard to do unless, like Ali said, you put it all down, right? Because you really can't do it in your head that easily, right? So, but once you have it down and then someone else is looking at it, they actually sometimes see the themes before you do, and that is such a fun part of like this job, I was working with somebody today who completed sort of this discovery document that I asked folks to do, which again has a lot of the similar questions that Ali said. And, I said, oh, I'm seeing this. And they were like, yeah, wait, actually, that is true. Yeah, I do have sort of a pattern where I, am constantly trying to support other people and sort of develop them as best I could. And I look for people in positions that are sort of a little bit more junior and try and, raise their profile and try and get, and all of a sudden you start to see these patterns. And so that then sort of drives, you build this narrative, you end up ideally with a bit of a summary at the end. So these are the things that I want to make sure come through in my application. And those are sort of your guiding principles that drives your essays. It drives what you tell your recommenders, talk about as well. So that in the end, your entire application, it's a holistic view that's all sort of, creating this same story. So that's, the idea there.
Yeah, I love that. I think a lot of applicants go into this process thinking like, oh, my experiences aren't great enough. Like I haven't founded a company or I haven't done this. But that's a lot of the power doesn't come in those like one-off things. It's how all of your little things kind of connect together. Like, who are you? Why are you the way that you are? And that's where the self-reflection piece, I think, can be hugely beneficial. Dion, there's a question in the chat that I think you would have some insight into. They're asking about like, how do you know whether the essay is vulnerable enough, but not crossing the line? Do you have any insight into like, what is too vulnerable? Does the limit does not exist? Does the limit exist?
Well, that's a good question. So when I work with my clients, I try to help them think about what is the person who's reading their application see. If you're being vulnerable and you end too soon, and it's just like, oh, this was a terrible thing, I'm being vulnerable, that is kind of missing the opportunity to say why you've chosen that example. How did you grow from it? And oftentimes the most challenging, the most vulnerable, scary, disappointing moments are actually springboards for talking about how you deal with challenges and failure. I think that not just to plug coaches, but it is helpful to talk to someone who can give the perspective of what it's like to be on the other side and give you an honest
Yes, a litmus test is like, yeah, not to plug coaching, but a litmus test is a coach. It's like that. Or if you have a mentor or someone where you can say, is this a little heavy-handed, or, does this make sense? Does it fit into the broader? Does it feel like I'm plugging vulnerability just to be vulnerable, or is it serving kind of the larger theme?
Yeah, I think it's, oh, sorry, go ahead. You go ahead.
Well, if you have a comment on vulnerability, go for it. And then I want to bring it back to the self-reflection for a minute.
Oh, yeah. I was just going to say, I think that, I was working with somebody recently who had a personal thing happen to them that was really sort of really hard, right? And it very personal, and they weren't sure if they should talk about it. And so, we sort of identified a way to sort of reference it lightly, but you don't have to go into all the details. You don't have to, say too much. You can kind of just like, there are sometimes ways where you can share things that you want to share, in a light-handed way, because really you're just kind of mentioning it, but then you're really talking about the takeaway. Here's what I learned from that experience, and here's how that has changed me as a person. That's the important piece, not the details, the nitty-gritty necessarily. So oftentimes there's ways to do it where it doesn't feel like you're going too far. Just wanted to add that in. Yeah.
Love that. Allie, bring us home.
Yeah, and I think just to Jerry's point, there is a separate section of 500 words usually that each school offers where you can explain additional circumstances that may delve into the territory of what's too vulnerable and not. But again, as Jerry mentioned, like kind of framing it to, and Dion said, as to what you learned and how it's made you a stronger, more resilient person is really critical. The piece that I wanted to add on self-reflection is often, so we're talking a lot about you personally as an individual, but something else in a different framing exercise is what are the big kind of societal challenges, or what are the more of the macro themes that excite you, animate you, if you are really having a hard time trying to understand, like, okay, opening up self-reflection is really vulnerable, it's really scary, I don't want to do this. Like, how have you contributed, or how are you thinking about contributing to society more broadly? I think this is more resonant in the Stanford and the Harvard applications than necessarily the Wharton ones, albeit there is a separate, like, what are you going to contribute to the Wharton community, where you can kind of broaden the scope and aperture of what you want to do. But the people who come to business school are highly ambitious. They're addressing those big, hairy, audacious goals. So as you think through self-reflection, another lens is, where do I want to play kind of and help society writ large?
That's great. I see the question in the chat. We will get to something similar a little bit later on. So I see it. We'll get to it. What are your top? So along this like line, so I've self-reflected. I kind of know what my themes are and what I care about. How do I go from there to actually starting to brainstorm and draft my essays? Dion, how do you start with clients on brainstorming and drafting?
Well, it really starts in the beginning. I, like Jerry and Allie, have exercises that are self-reflection. And so I don't really like to use the word necessarily personal brand, because it sounds very marketing and making people into a two-dimensional thing. But we have these exercises. I spend actually a lot of time speaking with my clients in the beginning and kind of pushing them, nudging, exploring. I'm curious. I mentioned before that I studied journalism, and this is a great job if you want to ask questions about why people do something. I kind of use this technique, the 5 whys. If someone says, well, why did you do that? And why didn't you do that? And why was something interesting to you? The one thing I did want to mention is it's very important when you're doing an essay to look at the application. Actually, AdCom spent a lot of time deciding what they want to ask. And sometimes people get so into thinking about, this is what I want to say, they're not answering the question. And it can be very frustrating if you are on the admissions side. Seems like a great candidate, beautiful writing, but what happened? I didn't get the information I needed to be able to make an evaluation.
Good point. Read the question. Jerry, any tips for brainstorming and drafting?
Yeah, sort of similar to something that, Allie said before, which is, the hardest part is starting, right? So sometimes, people are sort of, they get stuck and they're like, I don't know. And they say, okay, let's just come up with 3 ideas and then write for 20 to 30 minutes on each of them. And then let's see where you are, right? It doesn't, and then you have to give yourself permission to write something that is not good, because you're most likely not going to love the first draft or maybe even the second draft. So it's like, give yourself permission to write something not great. It's totally fine. Take those couple ideas, spend a little bit of time, like I said, 20 to 30 minutes writing on each, and then let's look at it and see where we are. Usually there's something that feels better. It feels like, oh, this was easier to write about. This felt right. This I have more to say. And it sort of helps you, to figure out a direction. I think that's, one sort of tactical way to kind of just get going on things. Sometimes people like to kind of think and like the starting to write is really the hardest part, because you want it to be amazing immediately. And it's probably not going to be amazing immediately. And that's okay. That's why you have people helping you and you're going to get there. You know, it might take 5 iterations or 6 or 7 or whatever, but you know, if you have a strong idea and that idea or that story is connected to that narrative that we just talked about, it's going to get there.
I love that. What you put down on paper does not need to be anywhere close to perfect. Just put pen to paper. Yep. That was great. Allie, anything to add?
I think the only riff off of Jerry's comment that I would make is oftentimes you can explore many different types of like candidate profiles or personal brands, for lack of better framing. Like when you start this process, you could be a PM tech who then wants to go found a startup, or you could say, you know, I'm a PM tech, but actually I want to go to consulting, or I'm a PM tech, but I actually want to go into VC. And all of those are very valid things at the outset brainstorming exploratory phase. And I would say take your time brainstorming, even if it takes 3-4 weeks. It is much better to like have these conversations and have these thought experiments now before you put pen to paper, and just have fun with the process. Be gentle with yourself, because it might feel like you're circling and circling and circling, but that's okay. That's all part of the journey, for lack of a better word.
Okay. Quick pause to show you some of the essay types that you might see. So typically they'll be bucketed into 3 things: personal statement, why this school, and then kind of a catch-all behavioral prompts. Personal statement are some of these hairier ones. What matters most to you and why? What else do you want us to know? Jerry, can I blame you for that one?
Probably, yeah.
Just like really kind of like, who are you as a person, which is really, really hard to answer. The why this school, there's why Stanford, Wharton's is infamous. And then the behavioral ones are just kind of tell us about a time you had a positive impact. Some of these other ones, you also have like NYU that asks you to pick 6 images, or Duke that says like list 25 things. So there's some random ones you'll see in there. How do you guys recommend approaching those personal statement ones? Those who are you? Why should we care who you are? What are you going to do in the world? Jerry, you want to start us off on this one?
Yeah, you know, I don't want to be repetitive. I know we sort of talked about the self-reflection piece, but it does start with that and making sure sort of you have that summary or those couple bullets or that, you know, so you know where you're headed. If you don't know what you're trying to accomplish, it's really going to be hard to do these, you know, these kinds of essays, the personal statement ones. So you start with that. That's your drive burger narrative, you know, and then you're choosing stories that support that, right? So you may have some great stories to share, you know, but if they're not helping to build and drive that narrative, then they're just stories for story's sake. So you want to make sure the things that you're using are, you know, they are thoughtful and it makes sense given what you're trying, the message you're trying to share. You know, you want to think about sort of what's the takeaway from each of these possible stories I could talk about, or these, you know, these experiences. What's the takeaway and what is it sharing about you? Is that what I'm trying to get across to AdCom? Because that's what they're going to hear. Yeah, and so I think that's, you know, that's sort of, unfortunately, like with the personal statement ones, it's a lot about doing that self-reflection piece, because there's really no way to talk about yourself without having done that first. I know people try to sometimes just like leapfrog that first piece because it's hard and it takes some time, and they like to dive right in, but oftentimes you end up realizing, what I've put together just isn't quite good enough. And so you eventually, you know, oftentimes have to go back and do some of that, you know, that pre-thinking. So yeah.
Yeah, I love that. It's a great answer. I'm gonna weave in, Dion, I'd love to ask you kind of a follow-up. That we got this question in the chat that every school has different values and perspectives and motives. How do you think about writing personal statement essays for, you know, 5 different schools that all have different values? Do you keep the same narrative and tailor it? Do you change your narrative depending on the school? Like, do I want to go into VC for Wharton and then entrepreneurship for Stanford? How do you think about kind of adjusting your personal narrative for different schools?
Okay.
Loaded
I
question.
would think that an applicant should be a chameleon and a totally different person. You are showing to the admissions person, whichever the school, you know, your true best version of yourself and what you will bring. And I mean, I would find it hard to believe that someone was equally passionate, equally qualified to starting a company and, you know, being a consultant and being a brand manager. I really spent a lot of time in the beginning working with my clients to enable them to clarify their goals and really lean in, put a stake in the ground of who they are and what they want to be. No, not wishy-washy, just ideas. And sometimes that is a little bit scary to people. It seems like they're they're closing themselves off to opportunities to be viewed in different ways. But I tell my clients, who are invariably very talented and motivated, that their risk is greater of just blending in, not making an impression, than standing out. And to the point of the question of how do you know this is too vulnerable or too like weird, I want to stand out in a good way. I think again of what is the purpose, what is the takeaway, and often the kind of like the key, the KPI, the success metric that we're really looking for in an essay and on this from the perspective of the admissions is this person someone who is intentional and will have impact? And I will quote, the GSB motto, which is change lives, change organizations, change the world. It's great if you're someone who's funny and entertaining, but if you're doing it all by yourself and no one notices, that's not as powerful as being someone who is going to, enrich the experience of others and hopefully go on to not only be personally successful, but personally impactful.
Yeah, I love that. Allie, any thoughts on this or on the kind of adjusting your narrative for different schools piece?
Yeah, I strongly agree with Dion that the authenticity will shine through, and that trying to flex to what you think the admissions committee wants to hear versus what you actually believe is true to yourself is important. I do think that understanding the resources and the personalities of the school and being intentional in drafting that initial storyline is really helpful and powerful. And the only other thing that I would say is that in some senses, there is a difference between what you want to do in the short term and what you want to do in the long term, right? And so schools understand that people grow and change over time. And so it's fine to indicate that there may be some type of progression. It's also fine to articulate that you're coming to school with a thesis and that thesis might change. And what you're trying to do in these environments is prototype. And that's great. But like Dion indicated, they want someone who's thoughtful, who's intentional, who's coming with a direction and a purpose. And that's what you get out of a lot of these essays and the development.
I love that. The schools care about different things, but they want to admit real people. And so show who you are as a person. And I think this goes the other way where like you want to go to a school where you fit. And so showing your most authentic self will also help you find the programs where you will thrive and won't, where you really will fit. Okay. Allie, I'm going to send it back to you for this one. How do you recommend approaching why this school essay? So Wharton notoriously has one of these.
Oh my goodness. Yes. And also, what are you going to contribute to the school, right? So I think in some ways, less is more in this approach. I think oftentimes students try to say, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that and I'm going to do this. And to the extent you can go deeper in fewer things, and the word I use with my clients oftentimes is get more granular. To Dion's point, ask the why, and then ask it like 4 more times. And if someone who is reading the essay, a friend, a family member, can't understand exactly why you're utilizing a specific resource, club, track, case competition, whatever it is, then you need to revisit how you're positioning that particular point. Also, the why this school should really connect to your professional aspirations, right? So it doesn't make a ton of sense to say, like, I want to go into early stage VC and then not mention anything about the entrepreneurship courses or the center or the speaker series or the alumni who come back. So it needs to be cohesive and clarifying. And then the other thing is, talk to students, talk to current students. Oftentimes these clubs have very large boards and they have a specific VP of recruiting or a VP of student outreach. And you can go online and press the contact us form and actually get on the phone and talk with someone who is current. I think one of the benefits of working with a coach who has gone to that school or has had more recent graduate experience is that they understand what the current initiatives and the priorities are. And all of us have clients who are very recent students as well, and kind of networks of people who understand what current offerings are and what current trends are.
I love that. Want to double down on the importance of talking to someone. Even go onto LinkedIn and find people who are alumni or current students who are in your current career path, because they will have the most up-to-date knowledge on what the school can offer people who have come from that industry and are going to that industries. Talk to people, talk to people, talk to people. Jerry, anything to add here?
Yeah, I would just add that, when you first think about this question, it's helpful to think from the school's perspective, right? So if I'm the school, right, I want students who love my school. I want students who understand what make it special. I want students who can explain like why this is a great fit for them. So it's kind of helpful to just put yourself in their shoes and make sure you understand sort of that perspective. And then that'll help you a little bit when you start to write, this essay.
That's great. Okay, quick commercial break. Coaches, get some water, clear your throats. This is the part of the podcast where we have a quick pitch. We have been in the MBA space for a long time. There is no better thing that you can do to get started on your application than do a boot camp. There is like an accountability piece that comes with joining a course. You're getting access to incredible, knowledgeable coaches with admissions committee experience. You'll work on interviews, essays, resumes, letters of recommendation, and you'll come out of this boot camp with like really real progress on your application that you can then go polish and personalize. And we are giving away a free seat to this boot camp to someone who is live attended. So congratulations, you've already done the first step. We just sent the link in the chat. You can also go there, bit.ly/winmba. Quick outline of the course. You'll cover everything from foundations, essays, school-specific information, everything that you could need to get started. Altogether, this costs almost $5,000. Coaching is not cheap. These coaches, they have a lot of knowledge and it's worth the time. But you can get it this week only for MBA application for $800. That is a steal. Again, this is like the best thing that you can get started on your application. bit.ly/winmba. We'll announce the winner at the end of the session. Go and sign up, $400 off just for MBA week attendees. Thanks for the shameless pitch, everyone. Back to our regular scheduled programming. We've kind of hinted at this a lot of times throughout it, but it's super important. You want a narrative. You want something that says, I started here, this is why I did this is how business school fits in, and this is where I'm going. Dion, how do you think about helping applicants kind of connect that post-MBA goal to what they're doing now and what they've done, and kind of building this like very cohesive story?
Okay, so I sometimes use the example of this very simple algebraic expression, x plus y is z. And if x is your cumulative life experience, your education, your accomplishments, and z is your future career goals, then you have to, I just underscore, you have to be able to know yourself and define this in order to solve for why. And why is why an MBA, why business school, why you, and why now? So it's the bridge. And so if you look at it that way, then you can see in an essay, you're not going to say, I'm like a blank slate. And I just want to go to school to meet people, to take a break, to explore options. You're going to say, I have accumulated this experience, this knowledge, and I have this exciting, meaningful goal, this thing I want to do that will really, again, to quote Stanford, change lives, change organizations, change the world. What I need is this specifically from the business school, and that's why it fits in. And so that the admissions team will want to believe in you, will want to help you achieve this goal.
I love that. Ali, anything to add here?
Yeah, I think that one, and business schools are very framework oriented, and maybe that's just my bias, but there is kind of a crutch that I use when I'm trying to help students evaluate how to make that through line connection. And one is like, am I using an MBA as a career pivot, or am I using an MBA to advance or evolve my existing skill set? And then usually there's some type of like aha moment, or some type of realization, or some type of like compulsion that you have to apply to business school at this point in time, and to identify why this is the right juncture for you to make that transition, whether it's deepening, broadening, or totally making a pivot. And so I think oftentimes there are ways that you've demonstrated interest, or you have demonstrated project experience, extracurricular activities, startup on the side, whatever it is, that starts to build that narrative and starts to develop that clear through line for the MBA AdCom. They don't know everything that's in your head. They only see what's on your resume. And like we opened kind of the essay panel with, this is the opportunity for you to connect those dots for them. So I think that kind of like bifurcation crutch framework is some place to start if you're having a problem trying to develop that clear through line. And
Yeah, that's great.
I was
All-
just gonna, oh, sorry, go ahead, Amelia.
Nope, you got it.
Okay, I was just gonna add, just tactically, briefly, like, I think, it's also important that what you're sharing in terms of your career goals are logical, right? So you want there to be breadcrumbs. You want there to be some story. How did I get here that this is the thing I want to do? What are the drivers? You want to make sure that's super clear, to the person who's reading. Otherwise, they're going to say, well, I don't get it. How did you land there, right? So I think you want to make sure it's logical and you're making it super obvious to AdCom. And I think ideally also you want those career goals, they really need to be ambitious, right? Because that's why you need an MBA. So you want to show, like, I have big goals. I really want to make an impact in X, Y, or Z. I have ambitions. Those are the kind of people that they like to see across the board, all business schools, right? So I think those are just, a couple tactical things to keep in mind too.
That's great. Okay, we got to speed through some of these last ones. We're running out of time. Dion, what are some common mistakes that you see when people are writing their essays?
Common mistakes. Well, I think we've all spoken about the importance of be real, be clear, be specific. So a common mistake or pitfall is the opposite, right? Too general, could be anyone. Don't really know who you are or why you do what you want. Not clear. Maybe someone has it in their head, but it's not clear. Like, is this answering the prompt, or what are you saying? And that often happens because people are unsure. They have not done the research and reflection, or they're a little nervous, as I said, about putting a stake in the ground, and not being real. I think if you read enough essays or work with enough clients like all of us have, when you read something, it sounds not right, or it sounds kind of like marketing or manipulative, like a little antenna goes up and makes you wonder about the person and their motives. And I have to say, it makes someone seem much less relatable, trustworthy, and likable. And I think no one can underestimate the importance of being someone that someone can relate to. They would want to have you in their class.
Yeah, they're not just admitting you, right? They're building a class. And I love that point of like thinking how you will be a part of that class. Allie, Jerry, any other common mistakes?
The one that I sometimes see, and this is often sort of on a first draft, because it's kind of the first thing that people think of, is basically sort of a resume rehash, right? So it's like, hey, I started here because I wanted to do this, and then I went here, and then I did this. And so at the end, you're like, this is really just sort of a rewriting of your resume, and it's not really telling me anything additional. So, it's obviously like super important to make sure that you're sharing new additional information, not something that they can find elsewhere in the application. So again, like, totally makes sense that sometimes your first draft, ends up sort of relying a little bit more on your resume and being a rehash. And then ideally you can kind of move away from that. So that's sort of a common pitfall I see.
Yeah, that's valuable real estate. Can't go wasting that. Okay, in our last minute, it could be a reiteration of something that you said or something new. What is your final tip for writing really great MBA essays? Dion, let's start with you.
Start early. Don't be afraid to do the tough stuff. And I think believe in yourself and the process. You cannot expect that you're going to just, it's going to come like one and done. Be patient. And I think what's been really rewarding to me is when I have my clients say, that was really not easy. That was hard. And now that I'm in business school, I'm not loving that process so much that I want to do it all again just for the sake of doing it. But I can honestly say that I've learned something about myself and my goals that I'm going to take forward with me. And some of these things I didn't even know myself.
Beautiful. Jerry, last tip.
Yeah. So similar, no, you won't nail it on the first try, and that is totally okay. You know, like we've said, sort of give yourself grace there. And then I think also be willing to pivot, right? So sometimes you think there's a great idea and you start writing and then it's just not working and you want to stick with it. And you have to sometimes just be willing to pivot. Like if it's not this, we're going to find something else. So I think flexibility there is important.
Yeah, that's great. Allie, bring us home.
I am such a big proponent of brainstorming. Get all the wacky ideas out there. Take your time before you actually like pick one or two paths that you really want to deeply explore. And then also recognize that self-care is important during this process, whatever that means for you. A lot of this is really raw, vulnerable. You may be revisiting stuff that you haven't thought about in a while. So whatever your safe spaces, people are, it's a big time commitment. The GMAT, GRE, work. And so just make sure you have fun with the process and view this, as Deanna had articulated, as a process of self-discovery, and hopefully you walk away with some level of self-improvement. And just have fun, and wishing you guys all the luck in the world.
From all of us, best of luck. We're here to cheer you on and support you. Last chance to enter the giveaway. We'll announce the giveaway in just 1 second, and I will stay on for the last 10 minutes. If you have any questions about the boot camp, stay on and I'm here to answer them. Please, though, join me in giving a huge thank you to our coaches in the chat. This is their weekend or their week evenings that they're spending helping us navigate this process. So please join me in thanking them. It was such great information. And you can work with all of these coaches on your essays. So there's discounts here. We'll send them in the chat. You'll also get a follow-up email with these in case you miss it. Thank you, coaches, for being here. You guys rock. Thanks for helping all these applicants navigate the process.
Thank you.
Okay. And the giveaway winner is Robert Bixler. Robert Bixler, we will be in contact. You win a spot in our boot camp. We are so excited to have you join our first cohort. Thanks for being here, everyone. Have a great evening. Thanks for being here. I'll stay on. Feel free to. Thanks, coaches.
Take it easy. Thanks, everyone.